I'm going to go through this really quick. There was this article, 10 Harsh Realities of Buying Modern Comics, that was put out not too long ago by CBR. It's always interesting reading stuff like this because you see that a lot of people, just two things. Mainly, they don't understand the business side. That looking through that lens is almost impossible for so many people as they sit here and name things that they find either are an issue with the industry or they find annoying or something of that nature. And if you don't understand it, I emphasize that all the time, the business part. If you don't understand that, your gripes about the creative stuff, it really doesn't matter. That's really the second part of it, right? They're tied together. This idea that both of them are just completely separate concepts is nonsense. You have to not only be creative in how you're marketing this stuff, but also in the material it is that you're creating, right? Because you got to turn it into buyers. A lot of folks that are creative think that people are obligated, or should be, let's say that, to support their material or support a certain type of material, even though there's not actually a genuine demand for it. Okay, so let's go through some of this. Again, some of these points, because they're harsh realities, I will concede them as an individual point. But when you just completely dismiss or understand why, let's say that it's a thing, well, you're missing the point here. So as it says, 10 harsh realities of buying modern comics. The comic book industry has changed a lot since the golden age, and modern readers are living through a harsh reality or a few harsh realities regarding buying. The comic book industry is in a state of flux with future uncertainty. It's clear that things will need to continue changing before it's in a truly healthy position. I agree with that. There are certainly bright spots and elements to celebrate, but comic book buyers are facing a few harsh realities during the modern era. As the way readers continue to engage with them, their content evolves, and the industry has to keep up with that. So let's go through some. Number 10, push for digital comics. He says there's a massive push towards digital comics right now. It's cheaper for publishing companies, more environmentally friendly, and easier for distribution. There are benefits to attacking or sticking to digital, but there are also drawbacks. Yes, there are. For starters, fans prefer being able to hold physical copies of the comics. Now, look, this is the harsh. You want to talk about harsh reality? Yes, there are people that buy digital comics. However, with comics, that is not as far as paying customers, that's not an actual like a drop in the bucket compared to the ones that prefer a physical copy. I believe that this industry will forever be dominated by physical copies, having the actual book in your hand, no matter how far we get into this more digital age. That will, for the most part, be the case. And yes, there has been a push by both major guys and independent guys to push that. But if you look at any of the sales data, even when like Comic-Con was still showing a lot of those like digital sales data, it's not even close in comparison to the physical copy. So yes, there is a push for it, but the demand really isn't there. Good digital comic platforms are rare. I don't think that has anything to do with why there is, let's say, a fundamental issue with this or a harsh reality with this industry. Graphic novels are slow to release. This was an interesting one. Many readers prefer to buying comics in bulk, essentially, rather than waiting for each single release to come out. Fans wait a little longer and get a graphic novel that collects all the issues in one place. So a trade. And again, that's simply when you look, there's no data that supports this, right? As far as the trades. Now, if you're using graphic novel as just big books, okay. But as far as the actual trades, there's nothing that shows that. Because if you look at the data in terms of individual sales versus of individual single comics versus the graphic novel comics of the trades, it's not even close. The individual ones, at least the retailers, are selling more than the actual trades are. So there was a myth. I remember when I used to cover all this data with the numbers every year, looking at Comic-Con numbers, and now, with ICV2 and what is it called? Circana or whatever it is. It's called that actual houses the point of sale data. You get people like, well, it's different now because people are preferring to buy trades. And I look at the data, it's like, no, they're not. They're like, It's not even close. You'll get like a few thousand of that trade that will sell, and then a single, even like a second, third, fourth, fifth issue of a single is selling more than that, again, at least to retailers. So there's no data that actually supports that, but it's not a problem. See, what's happening here is the same thing that has been happening for a while. It's people identifying maybe their individual preferences and then applying it to the industry at large when there's really nothing that supports that claim. So I'm not saying there aren't people that would prefer to, let's say, read everything in a collection. That's not what it is that I'm claiming. Of course, there's people that would prefer it that way. But looking at the entire pool of buyers, that's not a drop in the bucket. It's similar to the digital sales. It's not even close. Again, if you talk about original content that are big books, that's different. Like if it's a completely original thing and not like a reprint or a trade, as they call it. Marvel and DC dominate the industry. Well, CBR, you have a lot to do with that because you shield for them nonstop, and you're supposed to be this leader in comic book news. And I can go type in, for example, the Rippaverse there, even though we don't need you. There's nothing. You don't cover anything outside of that. There's approved channels that you want to sort of put spotlights on, which is cool. Again, your business. But let's not act like it's a problem because of anything that, like I say, it's not pretend like you didn't have anything to do with it. There are so many fantastic indie comics out there to subvert expectations and take readers on a stunning narrative journey, but those indie comics are often left behind because two companies. No. Well, no. Now that part I disagree with. They're not left behind because they dominate. That part I won't disagree with. They're left behind because maybe there's not a demand for it, especially when you name, because they're still mentioning major indies. Like he says, although comic books are trying to push readers towards alternative, comic book stores try to push readers towards alternative companies, it's fair to say that the industry isn't in the same place that it once was. Dark Horse, Image, and Boom Studios, for example, were major competitors during some periods and still, well, those guys aren't producing anything that people want. See, that's still the other part of it. Like, you could be a gripe and complain, but Marvel and DC has going for them what these other guys don't, and that's characters that are part of the fabric of this like the American culture. So people are going to gravitate towards them more, even if they're terrible books. They're going to gravitate towards those characters more than they are going to give some like alternative, newer stuff. This is why it's so important to be just really good at what it is that you're doing as an alternative and actually presenting something that it is that people want. Again, just because you're an alternative does not mean that people are obligated to support you. I still hope that this industry will evolve as people will discover more smaller creators and perhaps digital platforms like Webtoon making all the difference. Well, not when it comes to money. It's the same thing over there. A bunch of people griping about not getting paid because really people are just pirating all of their stuff. So just having eyes isn't enough. The screen has massive impact. Now let's read this. Well, Marvel and DC have been hell-bent on creating imaginative shared universes on the big and small screen, looking for corporate synergy. Those cinematic plans have, in turn, impacted the publishing slate. Suddenly, it feels as if comics are answering to Hollywood executives. That is probably the only thing that I don't want to say the only thing, but of the harsh realities, acknowledging that is probably the most important, or let's say the best point that was made in this entire article. Because that's true. And I've made that point. It seems like these guys are writing rejected movie scripts in a lot of cases. So that's very, 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 very true. That's what's influencing them. And well, they are tied, like Marvel and DC are tied to mega corporations anyway that produce film and movie and TVs and what have you. So yeah, that's kind of to be expected. But they also did themselves in. So if you look at it from the angle of they're not, even with these blockbusters, turning these into like astronomical sales. I mean, it's because there's really no connection between the two as far as continuity purposes outside of, again, the rejected movie scripts or accelerating people into their universes like the Ironhearts of the world and all that, who are really just relatively new characters. The comics heyday is over. Says anyone who has experienced times like the golden age, silver age of comics will know that there are ups and downs in the comic book industry. That is very true. The medium has gone through some absolute highs and some real lows, but for buyers, it's clear that it's no longer the heyday of comics. Well, it has been a heyday for a very long time. Perhaps there will come a time when comics are more popular again filled by cinematic saturation. With the industry shrinking in areas, there are fewer opportunities for indie publishers to fill those gaps. That's nonsense. There are more opportunities for independent guys to fill those gaps than there ever has been. Ever has been. That's that's just nonsense. Certain titles overload the market. Maybe talking about characters like Batman and Spider-Man. I brought this point of oversaturation. I think that's less of, well, like the industry making them do that, and more of, well, that's the only way that they can really make money is tying Batman and Spider-Man and these recognizable brands to certain things. But yeah, that's just kind of what it is. No room for risk. Now, this is an interesting one. Shrinking audience, smaller market, and two companies dominating the space, there isn't room for risk taking. And I disagree with that. But he says comic book companies have to keep a hold of their audiences by giving them exactly what they love. Very true. For Marvel and DC, that means more big events. No, see, that's the opposite. It's they're relying so heavily upon that they don't have to do that. Genuinely ambitious storytelling that changes the status quo isn't going to be seen as attractive for publishers looking to meet financial targets. Well, because that's the bottom line, is the only thing that matters. That doesn't, see, you're conflating two different things. I think that people think, well, because they did something that's off the wall and look quirky and all that stuff, well, people are supposed to support it. And that's just not how it works. There has to be a demand for it. But you're also conflating that with the entire landscape, where it means that you can't do something that's a little against the grain or a little different. You can't do that at all and see success. And that's just not true. It still just has to be something that people want. There has to be a demand. You're looking for actual buyers. And because so many creatives don't see it that way, they confuse themselves. They just get completely confused, or they think there's some level of unfairity. Now, this is where this guy just completely just loses it. Not enough diversity, this person says. One of the harsh realities of buying comics through most areas of the industry is that genuine lack of diversity in material, he says. Companies are beginning to move forward with plans to ensure that comics reflect their readership. No, they don't. That's the complete opposite. They don't do that at all. It's actually that they're trying to force feed people stuff that is completely against the actual readership. Right? When you go try to make these weird comics that nobody is going to buy, there's no true demand for it. They don't make up an actual legitimate portion of the market. That's the opposite. You're not doing stuff that reflects the readership. You're actually just trying to force feed the current readership whatever weird stuff it is that you want to give them. And that's where all these diversity efforts have come, or what's come of these diversity efforts. What's perhaps more stark for the consumer, though, is that there is even less diversity within the talent creating the comics. New initiatives need to be put in place to help out ambitious creators who haven't had the opportunities they deserve. That will lead to further points of view reflected by the buyer in a buyer's options. See, because so many people look at things through like this, yeah, the industry is going to remain in a tough spot, and the people that see successes, they'll continue to be confused. They will be, in some cases, angry, irate, and trying to delegitimize the efforts of those that have figured out a way to make money in this industry and to get people enthusiastic about this industry. Because they don't got the answers, though they think that they actually do. And a lot of things that they advocate are completely self-destructive. Nonsensical and self-destructive. So when you think that you have the answers and you have that arrogance about you, when you see someone else do something else, we dealt with this with the Rippaverse, right? Oh, it can't be legitimate. It can't be true. There's no way that somebody like this has saw some success. Therefore, something nefarious must be taking place. You'll look at it like that when you're ramming your head against the wall because you think that you got the answers, but you don't. This is the last problem that this industry faces. There are fewer comic book stores, they say. Does anybody think to ask why? Comic book stores were once lifeblood of the industry, but changing times have led to many closures. The push toward digital platforms has meant that people want to buy physical copies even less. That is not the problem. Thus, in many neighborhoods across the country. See, it's interesting where these people, and it happens all throughout the industries. different industries, not just the comic book industry. Well, people will identify a problem, but why it's a problem is where they get it wrong, which also means you can't really find a solution. So they're attributing it to the wrong things. It's a genuine shame as it has cut back a community and impacted livelihoods. There's a silver lining that, lining in that the success of comic adaptations has led to stories being sold in more mainstream shops, helping out creators across the industry, but buyers would have far more options of what comics they wish to read with more comic book stores available. See, that's not how it works. The comic book, Jesus Christ, the comic book is the retailer. The comic book stores are the actual retailers. So they're really, and some of them do, have participated in the nonsense that gone along with what, let's say, ran the industry into the ground, okay? So they're more so a side effect of a thriving industry, okay? And you can't force that. It's stores should be around more. Well, they're not around more because the demand for the comics have gone down. And the ones that are around aren't even relying on comic books as primary sales. They have to get in the games market. They have to get in these other markets to try to actually keep their comic book store around. They can't rely on it anymore. So for me, it's about this. I want to see this industry thrive. I don't got all the answers. There is no one size fits all. I will be the first to say that. But I do believe there are some things that are identifiable that will turn this ship around. However, the guys that feel as themselves as like the guys that keep the pulse on the industry, be it these news agencies and sites and organizations like the CBRs and the Comics Beats and all those guys of the world, the bleeding assholes, all those guys. In addition, they don't understand business. Almost none of them understand business. And then on the other hand, you have creatives that are within this industry that don't understand business. So some people just completely ignored it. They were like, well, there's no problem with the industry. Now people are starting to come around to it, but they're not properly assessing what the actual issues are. But this is the thing. In order to look at the solutions, you're going to have to look at guys like ourselves, which are the people that you hate. I'm just being completely honest. I'm not saying help us because I don't need your goddamn help. I'm not the one griping right now. What I'm saying is there's some of us that have figured it out, but we might be, according to you consider us your ideological enemy. And that's what the problem is. It's going to require you to assess what it is that we're doing, looking at it like it's the positive thing that it is, and maybe, not saying implement it across the board, but there's things that you can take that bits and pieces of the industry, and you listen to us, you hear us out, bits and pieces of the industry are going to be able to benefit from. I want to see the industry thrive. But it's not going to thrive so as long as people have their heads completely up their asses. If you like this video and want to get into a new comic book universe, visit Rippaverse.com. Our first campaign for ISOM 1 hit $3.7 million, and the pre-order campaign for ISOM 2 is currently live. So go check it out and watch the official launch trailer, which is the first animation of Rippaverse Studios.